Since the beginning of time, humanity has been fascinated by the conscience. The National Library of Medicine describes conscience as the highest authority, which I personally find alarming. Inasmuch as it aids us in deciphering between good and evil, it's also an unjust and often condemning judge. So what do we do with our conscience? One of the most used tools by our conscience to keep us in check is guilt. Many psychologists believe guilt is a natural, but for the most part, useless emotion. The reason why Dr. Hart disagrees with this is because our conscience can present one of two forms of guilt to our mind: false guilt and true guilt. False guilt zaps our energy and diverts us from productive living because it robs us of any good and happy feelings we might have. True guilt seeks to put matters right, to make amends, and to give and receive forgiveness. This is why it is paramount that we know the difference between true and false guilt, because our guilt can be distorted. In 1 Corinthians 8:7, we are warned that our conscience is weak and vulnerable to being defiled. In 1 Timothy 4:2, we are reminded that the conscience can be seared as with a branding iron. Fortunately, Scripture also states a good conscience is something we can possess and cultivate. Dr. Hart shares a sad yet deeply impactful story about distorted guilt. One day, a patient named Sam came to his office in desperate need of help. You see, Sam was a talented boat builder who had just completed a new boat with his 5-year-old son. Prior to leaving for the lake, his wife reminded him to take life preservers. He mumbled to himself, "I'm only gonna test it, not sail to Hawaii." When they finally arrived and set sail, Sam noticed that there was a leak in the boat. Trying to locate the problem, he didn't realize that the boat had gone into deeper waters and that his son was no longer with him. 10 minutes later, he found his son trapped under some reeds in the water. It was too late. This traumatic event marked the beginning of Sam's guilt distortion. He entered a deep depression, clinging on to two strong, damaging personal beliefs. First, he believed he caused his son's death, and second, he believed God was punishing him for his sins. The first belief is partially true, but the second is a complete lie. A lie we need to talk about. There's a difference between God's punishment and God's discipline. Hebrews 12:6 tells us that God disciplines those he loves, and he does that because it helps correct our steps. It's important to remember, much of God's chastening isn't what he does to us, but is what he doesn't rescue us from. Had God rescued Sam from his misery, Sam wouldn't have realized that it was his self-talk that was torturing him, not God. In fact, God was showing Sam grace and offering him forgiveness every single day. The moment Sam understood that was the moment Sam began his healing. Today, Sam deals with the painful memory of losing his son, but isn't wallowing in self-torment. And as we close, that's what I want to touch on. Sometimes, even when we've been forgiven, guilt can still linger. And in those moments, I need you to ignore that feeling. You have been forgiven. So for your own sake, try to move on. It's the only thing you can do. And I know you're probably thinking, well, sure, that's easy for you to say because you don't know how bad my situation is. You don't know how much I messed up, how many people I've disappointed, and how many lives I've ruined. I just can't free myself from this. Sure, I may not know how bad things are, but I do know that Christ came to set the captives free. Don't you think you spent enough time in captivity? The broken version of yourself will always break you, but the healed version will not only heal you, but heal those around you. See, the voice you're hearing right now belongs to a soul that was once tormented, a soul that is now in the process of healing and is learning to let go of the terrible things I've done and said to people who didn't deserve it. Had I not chosen to walk in the freedom that Christ had given me, I'd probably still be hurting others instead of healing them. I'll end with Dr. Hart's words. Keeping a clear conscience is vital to healthy thinking. It provides peace of mind and a positive outlook. Furthermore, if we don't settle the score with our conscience, we'll be more likely to struggle with the next step. I'll leave you with this question. When you you've been forgiven of an offense, do you act like it? In the next video, we'll discuss the fourth healthy habit. Don't punish yourself. In the meantime, if you've fallen, get back up, keep your eyes focused on Christ, and capture every thought.